I'm speaking to Teresa Conradie, a Christian attorney in Pretoria, and also a member of the Institute for Public Justice. Teresa, welcome to the studio, and thank you for taking time to speak to us.
Thank you, Errol. It's lovely to be here.
I want to talk to you about this legal challenge that was brought against 6 schools in South Africa. I think it's 4 in Gauteng and 2 in the Western Cape. Basically the challenge is to asking the courts to declare unconstitutional religious observance in public schools. What can you tell us about that challenge?
The application has 2 legs. On the one hand, as you've rightly said, it is a challenge, or they're asking court to declare certain religious observances in the school as on the one hand being unconstitutional and on the other hand being a breach of the national policy on education and religion. The second part of the application is where the applicants are asking the court to interdict these schools from specific religious observances. And the application actually itemizes those different observances.
So it's not religious education. They're talking about, for example, prayer in schools, having a sort of a Christian club or something in a public school.
Well, I think what we need to understand is although the application is specifically now directed to 6 schools with, let's call it, a Christian ethos, this cuts across the board. So it would also apply to the court judgment would have an impact on any state institution, in fact, or any state-aided institution. So whatever the court judgment is, it would apply to employees in the State Department. It would apply to all schools, in fact. Because the national education policy does not only apply to public schools, it actually applies to independent or private schools, as we know. Now, the policy makes a distinction between, in the first place, religion education, not religious education, religion education. And that is where education regarding the whole range of religions is included in the curriculum of schools, and there's no dispute about that in this specific case. Then the second category is the religious instruction. This is where a child gets instructed specifically in a specific religion, and the policy has the let's call it directive that is best kept to homes and churches. But what it is about here is the third category, and that is religious observation. So that would include what happens in an assembly. It would include what type of Bible clubs or religious activities take place during break times, after school. It would include membership of an organization, etc., etc. So this is what it's about. But as I say, it cuts across the board to all religions, not specifically to Christian religion.
So essentially then what this application is trying to achieve is ban any kind of religious activity, observance in public schools. And like you say, if this guy wins the case, it would apply to all public schools right across the country, not just the 6 schools that he's made the application against.
Yes, and it would actually have an impact on independent schools as well. Now, there is this misconception that it is illegal, unconstitutional to have religious observation of any kind in a state institution or in a school. And the important thing, and we've said this to one another on many occasions, the jurisprudence. Now the meaning of jurisprudence is it's the case law, the judgments that are made in our courts. It includes articles that are written. Jurisprudence around Section 15 of our Constitution is very underdeveloped. So there aren't clear legal parameters for us to know how far you can go. Now, Section 15 is the section of our Constitution that gives everybody the right to conscience and thought and belief and religion. And then Section 15.2 is the very important one for us to know about here. That allows religious observation in state institutions and state-aided institutions. And there are three requirements. First of all, the public authorities relating to that state institution, which in the case of schools would include governing bodies, have got the right to make the rules around how religious observation should take place. Secondly, it has to be done on an equitable basis. Now, that's debatable what it means to have equitable religious observance. And then in the third place, it must be free and voluntary. So it's definitely not completely impossible or illegal to have religious observance in schools.
And in these 6 schools then, is it voluntary? Are kids being forced to observe any Christian religious practices?
Yeah, Errol, it's very difficult to comment on that, because in every one of the schools there were different observances that were highlighted. It's very possible that these schools could say, this is not true, this is not what's happening in our schools. So the religious community in South Africa, in which, or who we would most probably be representing, would not be focusing on these specific incidents. We would like to have a principled approach to assist these schools and any other for that matter. They could be schools in a Catholic tradition, they could be schools with a Jewish ethos, with the Islamic ethos. We need to have jurisprudence to tell us how far can that observance go.
But like you say, it's largely up to the governing bodies to decide that.
Yes, the governing bodies can decide that, but of course the governing bodies, it has to still be constitutional. A governing body cannot decide on something that is not constitutional. So the governing body's rules still have to be made within the parameters of Section 15.2. And then, of course, the governing body has to see to it that it gets properly applied.
Now, you've obviously examined this legal challenge. You went through the papers. What do you think the chances of it succeeding are?
Yeah, it's very difficult to say that at this point in time. And yes, we've properly had a look at the application, but there are a number of legal principles that come into the thinking. We have to look at foreign case law. We have to see what is it that the Constitutional Court has decided previously on some of these aspects. So it's very difficult at the moment to, on the one hand, be able to tell you exactly what the arguments are going to be from our side, and I'll just perhaps in a moment explain, if I say our side, who am I talking about? And it would also be very difficult to guess what the court's judgment is going to be, because if I'm saying our side, there is a legal term, amicus curiae, and that means you are a friend of the court. So we have been approached by many, many different organizations across the board of different faith groups who have expressed the interest to become involved as amicus curiae. Now, when you are amicus curiae, you are not supporting either of the parties. You are assisting the court with your arguments and the information and the case law that you put to the court, for that court to make a good and sound decision on religious freedom, in this case, observance. So when I say we are a friend of the court, we are trying to extract for the court the correct interpretation of, for instance, what does a religious observation mean? When does religious observation go over into religious instruction? What does it mean that it has to be equitable? Does it mean that it needs to be proportional? Does it mean that it needs to that it just needs to be fair and not discriminating against anybody? So we've got our jobs cut out for us, and it's going to take many, many months before one would properly have formulated your arguments.
Now, you're a lawyer, so you understand this from a legal point of view. But obviously, after this news broke in the media, and just watching Facebook and all of those things, there was a lot of response from Christians, and a lot of it was obviously emotional. People saying, we look at the public educational system in South Africa. There's so much challenges with teenage pregnancies, with violence and crime and drug dealing and all of these things. Isn't it good to keep religious instruction in schools, teaching people values? Why would anybody want to take that out, and what government would want to take it out when we have the challenges that we have? Does this make any sense in law? Is this a good argument if you're going to the court to explain to the court what is happening? Is that a sound legal basis?
Yes, I think what our courts recognize, and which are one of the fundamental principles in our constitution, are that we are a plural society. We are a diverse society, consisting of many different races, of many different religions, and the spirit of the Constitution is to include and not to exclude. So, and this is my personal opinion. My personal opinion is the fact that Section 5.2 allows religious observance tells me that the writers of the Constitution appreciated the fact that religious observance serves a purpose, that it provides a faith structure, a faith framework in which people can function, in which people can relate to a higher authority. It definitely provides a value-driven, moral type of compass. So I think it would be wrong to jump to the conclusion that our Constitution outlaws religious observance or any type of religious activity in schools.
Public schools. Now, having read those documents, what do you think the main gripe is of this organization? In the media, they call it "Oh God." Oh God. So roughly translated, as an organization seeking for democracy in schools, and they don't want kids to be indoctrinated with any particular religion. So that's just a brief summary. But what is their main gripe with having religious activity and observance in schools?
Yes, I would think that in the first place, and it would be premature for me now to say they've got a good point or they don't have a good point, but it is really the way I understand it, to create an environment in a school where there is no religious influence. And the question is just, how realistic is it to start off with? And the underlying principles are that minorities could be discriminated against. A young child could, for instance, not be competent to say to a teacher, "I don't want to go to assembly," etc., etc. So, but having said that, Errol, I regard this, and everybody else that's working with us, regard this as an amazing opportunity for us to actually establish proper parameters. So we're not sorry that the applicant has come to court. It would actually promote and develop jurisprudence around this. And I've been encouraged by how wide the support has been, and if I say support, the support to develop religious freedom, not the support for either one of the parties. So there's a clear awareness that there is uncertainty, that you don't know whether you are entitled to, in your office, if you work for a state department, whether you are entitled to have a little Bible study in your office during lunchtime. Is that allowed or is that not allowed? It's a religious observance.
So the issue, those kind of issues, religious freedom and observances in public places, in work situations, that is still murky. It hasn't been really defined.
Yes.
And that's why you say this is a sort of a God-given opportunity, perhaps, that you can define this.
Exactly.
Because the other thing is the religious freedom issue. Religious freedom is in the Constitution, it's guaranteed in the Constitution, but it's not really fleshed out. It's not explained. What is religious freedom actually? And that's another thing that we need to establish jurisprudence, as you say, by a court of law so people properly understand what that is.
Yes. And I mean, we can try and have high philosophies about it. The fact is there are schools in South Africa with a Catholic tradition, with an Anglican tradition, with a Jewish tradition, with a Islamic tradition. And very often those schools were actually established and funded by that religious group. So the question is, if you have funded and established a school, whether you are entitled to determine its ethos.
That's right. There's lots of faith-based and religious schools established by churches and other faith groups. So what do you do if you then declare that unconstitutional? What happens to those schools? Yeah. And the other point, obviously, also to make is that faith-based or education and having those values in a schooling environment is very helpful to students. And young people have said that they actually need that. That's another issue that has to be discussed, is that do most South African schoolgoers want religious observance and activity banned from their schools? Do the kids actually want that? I would say I don't think so.
I doubt that they would have to, but this is also a golden opportunity, Errol, to teach children about religious freedom, to teach children about tolerance.
That's right.
To teach children that you are entitled to believe something, and that in terms of our Constitution, that right is protected. The beauty of our Constitution is that, and it's sometimes a misperception, that we're supposed to all believe in everything that the Constitution allows. But that's not true. Section 15 says you can believe that certain things are wrong even though they're legal. So this is a wonderful opportunity, I think, for us to educate learners about their rights around religious freedom. Even if they're in a school with a particular ethos, that they are entitled to believe differently. And that we teach our children tolerance, we teach our children what religious freedom means. You know, we as Christians, we often err that we believe that religious freedom means freedom for Christians. And we've only got as much freedom as we are prepared to grant to somebody else. Right. So the whole understanding of the meaning of religious freedom, and I think we've got so much to teach the world. You know, if we could properly thrash this out and establish a model of some kind, then that's done jointly by the religious groups as we hope it's going to happen. It could really stand as a model for the whole world. And then the beautiful instrument that we have in our country, of course, is the Charter of Religious Rights and Freedoms. that was drafted by faith, all kinds of faith groups, and the Charter gives us very, very good direction as to how this could actually be shaped and defined and formulated in schools.
It's very important, that Charter of Religious Freedom. I think young people need to be educated, and South Africans generally, about that Charter. I think that this is more about demonizing religion, it's my personal opinion, than it is about democracy and giving people space and all those kind of things. But again, as you said, this is a God-given opportunity, and we trust that God will give you the wisdom, the lawyers that are going to be fighting this case, that we achieve the objectives that we want to, and that is establish jurisprudence for religious freedom, for observance in schools, and begin to define these issues so that all religions can operate and live freely in this country. So, Teresa Conradie, I want to thank you for coming to the studio. Thank you for the work you do. God bless you as you continue to fight the good fight.
Thank you, Errol. As always, it's been a privilege to be with you.
Thank you.